You're listening to the Art of Making Home podcast with Sandro Stefanucci, a home builder with over 37 years of experience in the industry. This series shows you the construction industry from the contractor's perspective, as well as what it's like to work with the many different types of industry experts, such as interior designers, architects, and subtrades. In addition, we'll be discussing challenges that we have encountered and what other industry professionals can learn from those stories. We'll be covering such topics that many people do not consider before building a home. Like, what can your property actually allow? Is your property located on a steep hill? Where is the location? What will the municipality enable you to construct? It might not be as cut and dry as you think, so let's get the conversation started.
Hello, beautiful people. It's Sandro Stefanucci from Abstract Homes. Glad you can join us today. And the question I get frequently asked is, how much does it cost to build a home in Vancouver? That's a real hot subject in many ways. So, first of all, asking the builder to give you a square foot price on a home is not a fair question for the builder. There's a lot of things you have to take into account when you're looking at or estimating a cost of a home, or even, trying to get a square foot price of a home. So maybe we just start from the beginning and the way that we do things and have a process. We'll talk a little bit more about the construction plus contract process. But so what happens is once we receive drawings, architect or designer, there's engineering that has to get done. And then from that, we'll do a preliminary budget. Then we'll present that preliminary budget to the customer. And then once the contract is signed, we get our retainer on that. And at that point, typically the plans with the engineered drawings will go into the city. There'll be a permit application at that point. And while that is getting done, we get into the interior design. So usually it takes a while to get your permit. So there's plenty of time to get the interior design completed because we have the basic frame of the house. And we know at that point that the city will accept the way that the plans are. So there'll be minor changes, if any, at that point. Then once we get the interior design done, we can budget, because the details and the specifications for interior design, they can vary dramatically. So once we have that, then we can go into a full budget, and then we'll have a final budget presented to the customer. Again, we talked about, the usual question is how much does it cost, or how much a square foot does it cost to build a home in Vancouver? And I say, okay, well, it depends. So what are you building on? You're building on a hill? You're building on rock? Are you building on mush? And we got to do some piles and put 30 or 40 piles in there so we can put the foundation on top of that. Those are all questions that will vary in cost into designing that. So we just flat lot, we go on a 4-foot foundation, we go on an 8-foot, 10-foot foundation. Those make a big difference in cost per square foot. So there is a group called the Altus Group, and they have a Canadian cost guide right across Canada, and they'll give you square foot averages for construction cost only. So keep that in mind. Not architecturals, not permits, not engineer fees, design costs, or any of that kind of stuff. Just straight hard cost just to build that home. And I'm looking at it right now, and they're custom built single family residential for Vancouver. The low end says $450 a square foot, to the high end is $1,135 a square foot. So that's your average, and that's construction cost only. Say a builder was to give somebody a square foot price. A lot of times it doesn't include the soft costs. It'll just be strict build costs. And typically the lower cost, if you get somebody that's lowballing that price, they're just going for basic code compliant. That's it. Minimum standard. So in a lot of cases, that's not quite good enough. But however, so that's what needs to be asked too. Is this just going to make code? Obviously, they have to pass a code, but code minimum is bare minimum, like even for lumber and stuff like that. There's minimums that you can use for lumber and spacing. Your engineer can space it bigger than what, typically if you want to have a better spacing and better structural. So there's a lot of variables that can change within that to get those prices really low. And of course, we don't kind of subscribe to that kind of thing. We want to build the house properly. We want it to last for generations. There you go. That's basically giving you overall synopsis on that. But again, look at the Altus Group cost guide for construction costs, and that gives you averages all the way across right to Ontario and more. I will put the link in the podcast description, and it'll be for the Altus Group, and you can take a look yourself and you can see what the costs are. People getting prices, again, square foot cost, and when they're looking at their, say if there was an estimate or something like that, they have to be really careful that they include, what is it that you're including? So if you're looking for that, then you have to also be very descriptive to whoever it is you're asking to get that price. What does it include? If you're going to give me a price per square foot, what does it include? Everything. I think that's a fair question. And again, people don't necessarily look at, they'll just go down right to the end, bottom line and look at, oh, how much a square foot is it, right? They don't look at that, which this is the wrong thing to do. You really need to know, do your homework and make sure you know what it is that you're pricing out. Nevertheless, for a contractor, to be able to have control or at least be able to estimate it properly. I mean, typically the prices always end going up. How we do that is our cost plus contract. It just depends on that, when we start the initializing it. So as soon as we get the contract signed, say to build a home, we lock that lumber in right away. So we say, okay, because typically lumber company will give you 30 days, but I've gone and I've done it and I'll be able to hold a price for me. So as long as they know that they've got the job, I can get that locked in for that price at that time. Things you should know about a construction estimate. So I guess really the process, and again, very much similar to when you're looking at, if you're asking how much does it cost to build a house, people don't really look at it, and it could be very daunting task for someone that doesn't know, how to build a home or what to look for in a home. But the estimating, so again, it's after you sign the contract, to build a home you're comfortable with, obviously the contractor you're going with, and you got everything there as far as, what it's going to cost roughly budget wise, a rough cost of what it's going to do. And then from there, you'll get a spec sheet. And in that spec sheet, it depends on where the person's budget is. So we'll use a better grade of lumber in there. So starting from the lumber itself, we get into excavation again. You'll see on a lot of sites that when they do the excavation, that they'll take the native material and stockpile it and put that stuff back in there. That should never go back in the excavation again. That is just fill. It is actually no good for backfilling a foundation wall with it. It's just really bad material. It should be granular material that drains and proper right from the base of the footing where the footing sits on. The excavation have a little bit of slope to it to actually slope to where the drainage is in connections for the sewer and water and the storm lines. And then we backfill with proper material. We truck it in. So there's a cost to that. It's not inexpensive to do that, but it's the right way to do that. But bare minimum code would say you need 6 inches of rock around, say, your drain tile. Then you can throw whatever you want in there, and that stuff packs down. You can't put sidewalks on it. A lot of times you'll see sidewalks that are all over the place in a few years' time because the ground is settled. It's not packed. It can't pack it because it's just garbage material. It really pays in the long run to pay a little bit more money up front for the better materials so that your house will last. And you're not going to have problems with it, especially if you go sell it 10 years down the road again. You're not going to get the return on your investment because you'll have issues like that because you decided to pay a lower price, say, to get that home built at code minimum. We talk about soft costs and hard costs. So if you look at hard costs, it's like, lumber, say gravel, fill, shower doors, those are hard costs of a home. Soft costs, you're talking about your architecturals, your engineers, design components, those kind of things are what your soft costs are. How we do our pricing is, again, we get real prices at the time that we're doing it. So again, if you're pricing this, say the exact same home a year down the road, or a year and a half down the road, it's going to generally cost you more money that year and a half later. We price everything out. Once it's inspected, we kind of price and we get the real costs on it, and that's about the best we can do to get the actual price of what it costs to get, say, whatever the shower door for that house or the tile or whatever it may be, flooring, and we get those costs and we get them held in once we got the signed contract, and we're on track. And as we move along with the budget of a home, we'll start tracking it, and then every 2 weeks we kind of review that. Where are we at with the budget? Are we on target with that? So we can also make adjustments. Say you're spending a lot in one area, so say the foundation. So we found that there were bad ground there. We had to do some engineering and building up the soil. So we had to spend more money there. So let's take a look at that. Where can we move some stuff around? Can we, spend less here in this area? So we kind of look at those areas as well. And sometimes it's not always possible, which I always tell customers, always leave yourself a contingency of 10% build cost. That's the only way to do it and to be safe. And that also pays for, say, rising costs down the road, because typically by the time we get the process going and get a permit to start digging, that's a year and a half down the road most of the time. So prices do change. So that's how we kind of navigate around, the budget and the pricing of those particular items. Costing between sub trades and materials, we have the guys that we've been dealing with for a while. So we just kind of go with that. And then we typically, whoever we get to say, give us a budget to do that particular job, we'll use them again because they're already familiar with the job. And that's how we build a budget to begin with. Yeah. So when we build a budget, there's been a lot of guys that we have that we've been using for years. So we'll continue to use them. They get as we get the specs for the home, they get those specs and they price it out. And then that way, we've got some control because they'll come, they'll check on me in a few months down the road if we're like, are you still wanting this product and stuff like that? So they typically have it and we can, we know that we're going to do the job. So we kind of get them to hold that product for us. Sometimes that requires a deposit, depending on who it is. So that's how we can control the cost, and that's how we get our estimating done. So that really is more of a smoother process for us, for sure. Let's just say you have 3 contractors bidding on a job. So again, the initial price. So most experienced contractors will look at, say, they got a set of plans from an architect, and they know what the land is like, and they'll come up with a rough number based on their knowledge and experience to give a rough estimate for that home, right? And then if the client accepts it at that point, that's when you get back into the process. Okay, now I got this interior design specs, which a lot of times we don't get those right away because half the time the architect will, give us a set of plans and engineering, but not the interior design package. That comes later on. So we can just generally figure out what it would cost to build it. And then if we do get job, and then that becomes a more forensic, say, budgeting process at that point. Once we get the interior design package, then everything gets tendered out. Then we get some hard numbers to what we're doing. As long as you're dealing with an experienced contractors, you should get a pretty good price. And again, don't always take the lowest price out there. We need to talk about this at another podcast, is about, architects and builders working together. So having said enough of that, thanks everyone for listening to our podcast, and we hope to hear from you. Any comments, please, by all means, just connect up with the link there and send us some comments, and like us, please. We need the likes on there to get us moving in the right direction. Thanks guys for listening, and we will see you soon. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Art of Making Home with Sandro Stefanucci from Abstract Homes. Make sure you keep following every episode to learn his advice about the building industry here in the Lower Mainland. He will have great tips on following episodes when it comes to building or renovating your home. Make sure to follow us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and of course, Apple Podcasts, so you don't miss his latest construction advice. If you want more information on Abstract Homes, all you have to do is go to their website, abstracthomes.com. Talk to you next time.